Hi everybody, I make it 12:30. Welcome to Agencia's latest webinar, Leading Through Uncertainty in a Pandemic. This is the third in the current series, helping support organisations through what are most certainly uncertain times. I'd like to welcome our experts, Nick Hawkins and Richard Wood. Before I hand over to those guys, can I draw your attention to the Q&A facility on the panel within the Zoom system, within the Zoom application. If you have any questions, do feel free to note them down there and we'll address these at the conclusion of the presentation. Also, to let you know, the slides will be shared and this webinar is being recorded and it will be added to the Agencia website and shared via social media. So I'll hand over now to Richard and Nick and hope you enjoy.
Thank you very much, Damien. And over to Nick first to introduce himself and then back to me. So Nick, back to you.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks for joining us for this third Agencia webinar. We hope you find it useful and hopefully even a little bit enjoyable. Let me briefly tell you a little bit about my background and of my experience of uncertainty. I started my career with 22 years in the Royal Navy. That's enough for a webinar in itself, but perhaps the most uncertain time I had was sailing on a salvage operation immediately after the Falklands War, where we didn't know how long we'd be gone for, whether we'd be able to do what we were being asked to do, and how many of us were going to be coming home at the end of it. Life in the Royal Navy is full of uncertainty, full of ships program changes, full of lots and lots of changes, which was ideal preparation for my next phase of my career, which was 15 years as a Chief Crown Prosecutor, where, as anybody who's been involved in criminal justice will know, you never know what the next phone call might bring, whether it's a grumpy judge just sounding off to being asked for advice on a serious crime that's ongoing. I then managed to fit in 3 years in the Home Office in the Ministry of Justice in senior posts to get the set. They have lots of uncertainty too. And I'm now a barrister in Normanton Chambers and very pleased to be an associate with Agencia. And I've recently worked in Kosovo and Turkey on rule of law projects. Again, the theme there is you think you're going to do one thing and you end up doing something completely different. So Rick's now going to share his background with you.
Thank you very much, Nick, and welcome to those of you who are joining us this afternoon. Just a little bit about my background. I started off life as a navigation officer and safety officer in the Merchant Navy. Specifically, one instance that still haunts me today. I served on a ship carrying aviation fuel in the Gulf during the time of the war between Iran and Iraq. Which certainly tested everybody's mettle on board the ship. I went on to join the police, ended up managing a team who investigated child murders, which I think was an exceptionally traumatic period in my life. I went on to work within the Home Office on counter-terrorism planning. I got 20 years, in essence, working in conflict-affected areas with the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the UK's Foreign Office. I am listed as a conflict and stability advisor with the UK government. In the last few years, I've been a diplomat with the EU's Foreign Service, specifically posted in the Balkans in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Of course, for those of you who recall, a war-torn country and a country that still teeters on the brink of some very serious and unpleasant history. Currently Director of Justice, Policing and Security with Agencia. Back to you, Nick, to set the scene with the first of the 10 top tips.
Okay, thanks. Rick's trailered that the format now is 10 top tips, and unsurprisingly, we're going to alternate. Perhaps what might come as a surprise to you is that I'm not going to talk about uncertainty for the first top tip. I'm going to say that the fundamentals of leadership still apply. And if you think about it, and I'm sure having seen the attendee list, you all know this because you've all got fantastic leadership backgrounds behind you. Leaders set out a vision, they inspire people, they support people, and they get the best out of people. I know Graham's one of the attendees. Last week in his webinar, he highlighted the need to balance the needs of the team, the task, and the individuals. Well, that was something I was taught over 40 years ago, and it stood the test of time for me. And the final leadership essential that I'd say, or leadership fundamental that still applies, is leaders reflect. And we reflect about what we've learned, we reflect about what we are learning. So everything we've done for many, many years still applies. Over to you, Rick, for number 2.
Okay, thanks. And I think just to remind ourselves here that we already have experience of leading through uncertainty. In a normal world, we would just take a moment to remind ourselves that we have lots of experience of leading and lots of experience of managing teams and individuals. And there are always unknowns, there are always uncertainties. The teams and the individuals that we work on, of course, thrive on information. They thrive on being given responsibility, and they thrive on positive communication. And to assist this process, what we normally would do is to examine the unknowns, the uncertainties, by planning where we can. We gather and we share information by communicating as effectively as we can, and by dealing with what is possible. We, over the years, certainly from my own personal background, have gathered a selection of tools that we use on a daily basis. And I refer to these tools that I carry around in my backpack. Nobody can see it, but I know it's there. And we use them as and when needed. We plan, we brief, we motivate, we organize, and we give responsibility. And that's all in the normal world. But of course, in the normal world, there are less unknowns, there are more knowns, there are less uncertainties and more certainties. So we already have lots and lots of experience of leading through uncertainty. It's just a matter of finding those best tools that are hidden away in our backpack and bringing them out at the right moment to develop the capacity of the individuals and the teams that we work with to continue to benefit from the results that should come in. Now back again to you, Nick.
Well, Rick's nicely led into the 3rd tip, which is about information, and it's work out what you know, and importantly, work out what you don't know. But it's obvious to say this, but it's true. Start with what you know. It's a tried and tested methodology. Some know it as the gap analysis. Police know it as a decision-making model. Then work out what you don't know. But don't panic, work out how critical is that lack of knowledge. Ask yourself, can you find out what you don't know? What are your sources of information? These days, Google is a fantastic source of information to us. So are people, so are books. There are endless sources of information, and we do have time on our side at the moment. If you can't fill the gaps in the knowledge, can you make assumptions? What assumptions can you make? What do you base them on? Do you need to make assumptions? And keep repeating the process. And as you fill in the gaps, reevaluate the circumstances, reevaluate the decisions you're making, and then something else will change. And there'll be something else you don't know, and you'll start the process all over again. And now back to Rick.
Okay. The next point that I'm going to cover is the fact that we have to accept that we'll never know everything, and it's just not possible. So we won't be able to solve everything. We won't be able to know everything. But remember that you have a team around you, that you have colleagues who are always very willing to step in and help. You need to continually enable the process of utilizing the skill set that you have around you. Never be concerned about asking others for their ideas. Accept that uncertainty is unsettling for you and is certainly unsettling for all around you as well. That, of course, comes in different degrees. Some people get extremely emotional and very upset. Others remain extremely calm, and there is a number of different emotions and resulting focuses that come out of individuals around you all of the time. Nick, back to you.
So if you're feeling uncertain and unsettled at the moment, how can you ground yourself? Well, using a nautical metaphor, find your anchors. You still have a vision. You might need to refine it. You still have a mission, and the mission may now be time critical, but it's something to focus on, and it's something to measure success by. And in uncertain times, it's important to have successes. You still have values, whether they're your organization's values or your personal values. Don't compromise them. They're what make you what you are. You still have a team, and I'm sure we'd all agree, we need each other like never before. And finally, an anchor that we always forget in the mad 24/7 world that we operate in. You have a life outside work, and this may provide the motivation or grounding you need. I suspect those of us with grandchildren have yet to explain to them what coronavirus is. They just know that life's different. But they certainly put a smile on our faces and remind us that there is life after a crisis. Rick.
Okay, thank you. And another point from me is the important, linking again back to what I was saying before, the importance of your team, but being there for your team, especially when they need you. Be there for them. Be yourself. The leader that they already know. It's not time to change your style or to change your approach. Maintain what we all know is the open door policy. Encourage the team to contact you as and when they wish to do so. It's important to be it's certainly an important part of being a leader. A person whom I know, a good leader, complained to me once about always being interrupted. And I said, well, no, I don't think that is a problem. That's part of being a leader. But do remember that you can fix your quiet time. So don't be concerned about maintaining that open door policy. Encourage the team to contact you. Your team now needs to be able to trust you more than ever, and your personal integrity is paramount. It's important that you maintain your standards and maintain your connections with the team, not to be mollycoddling or over-connecting, as sometimes happens, but as I said, maintaining that open door policy. Back to you, Nick.
Again, a very neat segue, Rick. My next tip is share information. And sharing information means sharing what you know and including what you don't know. So what's the trick to sharing information? Well, update information when things change, when you have something significant to pass on. Admit what you don't know. Nobody expects you to know everything. You can't know everything. But teams will trust leaders that say the answer is, I don't know the answer is, far more than they'll trust a leader that tries to bluff their way out of it. And there's another point related to that, which people who handle confidential information will know. And that's sometimes you do know the answer, but you're not at liberty to share it with your team. Again, tell them, yes, I do know the answer, but I can't share it with you now. When I can share it with you, I will share it with you. And then the other point on sharing information for me, Rick's already touched on. Beware information overload and communications for the sake of it. Having served on a number of ships, under a number of captains, I know the ones that were the most effective communicators were the ones who didn't do it very often, but when they did, they got something really significant to say. The ones that were on the main broadcast all the time, you switched off to. Rick's mentioned authenticity. Don't put on an act or change your personal style too much. And finally, back to trust again. Actually, if you didn't have the trust of your team before this crisis or any crisis kicked in, you're going to struggle. But if you'd already got the trust of your team, you're ahead of the game, and that bit of communication and sharing information becomes easier. So I'm afraid your past performance is really going to count now. And I'm sure that's a segue into Rick's next point.
Yes, indeed. Again, be positive, but be realistic. And again, it links very nicely to what Nick was saying. Be realistic, tell the truth, say if you don't know. And again, I go back to this point about your personal integrity being paramount. Stay positive. We will get through this. People do remember the calm and positive approach. They remember a smiling face, and keeping to the nautical theme that is very clear between Nick and I, a steady hand at the helm of a ship is required when navigating through stormy waters. So again, with that message back across to you, Nick.
Well, I have to acknowledge Graham's fantastic webinar last week in my next top tip, which was look after yourself and your own morale. Well, I'd written those words down when I was discussing this webinar with Helen and Rick, and before I'd heard Graham's fantastic contribution last week, but I think it bears repetition. Maintain contact with your networks, inside and outside works. On a personal note, I had a WhatsApp message from a friend today sending me his wedding photo for 35 years ago, saying happy times, and following up telling me he'd been called out of retirement by the army to do something at the Nightingale Hospital. That was a boost to my morale. Be honest with yourself. Know when you're struggling. Know when you're running out of gas. Be honest with your boss. Admit your fears, but equally speak truth to power. It's interesting that there seems to be quite a lot of that going on at the moment. Give yourself downtime. You are no good when you're exhausted. And I'm sure we all know we make bad decisions when we're exhausted. I'm no Joe Wicks, but keep exercising. It's good for your mental health. It's good for your resilience. I've mentioned your family before, but remember they're living through uncertainty too. So don't take your frustration out of them. And my final tip under this heading is keep a sense of humour. There was an old saying in the Royal Navy, if you can't take a joke, you shouldn't have joined. I think you'll find there's humour even in adversity, and it does keep us going. And finally, number 10, Rick, please.
Okay. Here I'm going to talk, again, a very simple message, but it's a question of reminding ourselves. We need to learn lessons and plan for the future. Learning from experiences is always an important part of life, even in our normal world, but now more so than ever. Learning from experiences, both good and bad. Maintain a positive approach, maintain positive feedback. When something goes wrong, examine the situation, see what can be learned, and ensure that it doesn't go wrong again. When something goes right, ensure that you understand why it went right, and make sure that you congratulate the individual and the team involved. Very often in stressful situations, we forget these simple but very important factors in motivating the team that we work with. Learn about your people. We're all different. Our motivators and demotivators are all different, but take a little time out to focus on your team, to understand them. I think it's very important that it's not all about work. Remember to ask about family and ask about what's going on outside work. A crisis can change the way that we do things, and I can think of many things in my life that have been altered, but the reality is that I've spent the last 20 years of my life living in crisis and war-torn environments, and I continually, on a daily basis, learn to do things differently, and very often learn to do things in a better way. Ask yourselves, are there things that you can do that are better, that are different? Identify future opportunities. Never ever take your eye off the horizon and keep looking slightly beyond. Refine your vision accordingly. Use any forced downtime wisely. You can see behind me, I'm not so sure whether I'm using mine wisely, but I've got a huge 1,000 piece jigsaw that when I get frustrated with things, I go and sit and stare at that for a few hours, and the frustrations all go into the jigsaw. Use the fact that we will get through this. Remember that this is a period in our lives that we'll look back on soon and think, gosh, that was fairly awful, but we're through it now, and we'll move on. Back to you, Nick, for a summary.
Well, I hope we've now got the 10 top tips flashed up on the screen for everybody to see. I'm not proposing to read them out again. You can look at them at your leisure, but Rick and I both hope that you'll look at that list and at least say, yeah, there are one or two there that ring a bell with me. And if you think all 10 are great, even better. And I think that's now time for me to hand back to Damien as the host of today's session. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Fantastic, as always. Yes, the top 10 list is up now, so hopefully attendees are absorbing those at their leisure. As mentioned to them previously, we will be sharing those slides so that we'll have a list to be able to refer to and access. No, fantastic, thanks very much. We do have a question from Graham. Richard, I think this addressed the point that you raised in terms of assessing how do you assess what you don't need to know?
Yeah, well, I think both of us can answer to this one, but I'll certainly give it a crack first. There's an awful lot of things that when we look at them, we can prioritize things that we would like to know the answer to. But do you really need to know the answer? For example, an awful lot of people are focusing on the virus and all of the issues that are going on around them. But is it really the virus that you're needing to know about, or is it the consequences, what's going on behind that affects the business, that affects you? And that's where you would focus your answers. If you don't need to pursue a question, park it, leave it. It's not a worry for you to add to a list of worries that you've already got. So Nick, maybe you want to take that on as well and develop it a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with everything Rick said. I think I would answer it a slightly different way of saying, can you make a decision without a particular piece of information? And what are the risks of making that decision without that piece of information? And what are the risks of not making a decision? On ships, we used to exercise fires and floods and other damage all the time. And my role on a ship was to step back and look at an incident board that showed what was going on in every compartment in every ship. Was there a flood? Was there a fire? Was it full of smoke? Were there casualties? And we never, ever had a complete picture because people give you the wrong information, they don't know all the stories, and you had to make time critical decisions. And I think the key is the risk of not making a decision, albeit one that's made on incomplete information, greater than the risk of waiting for all that information? There's no right answers, but as leaders, that's a judgment call that we exercise every day. It's just time's not on our side.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Richard. Fantastic. We have around about 6 more minutes scheduled in to take any questions. So to draw our attendees' attention to the Q&A facility, if you hover over the Zoom application, you should be able to ask any questions there. Nick and Richard will be hanging around for those 6 minutes. If we have a lot of questions, then they'll be hanging around for a little bit longer, and we'll try and address everything. We do have, or we will be sharing Nick and Richard's contact details as well. They're up on the screen at the moment as well. So if you do have any questions for the two guys, you can contact them through those as well. But Richard, Nick, if there's anything else you want to mention now, do feel free. I'll also mention if there are any questions. We do have one comment though from one of our attendees. They really did enjoy the anchor analogy. That's great. So if you do, if there's one thing you take away from this presentation, then that's great.
I think the other thing I'd offer, if I may, Damien, is the title of this presentation was Leading Through Uncertainty originally. And somebody, no names, no pack drill, added in a pandemic. But I hope that what we've given you would apply to any period of uncertainty, any uncertain situation, any crisis. And it's just that this dreadful pandemic is focusing our minds at the moment. But I'd like to think that everything that both Rick and I have said in the last 20, 25 minutes would hold good when we have the next period of uncertainty and the next crisis, which will undoubtedly come next year, the year after, sometime down the track.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. I think you're right, Nick. And also, it's worth mentioning, obviously, this is a series of webinars, and the themes are consistent, certainly through the 2 previous webinars and leading into this one. So there's some really consistent information and ideas that you might, if you like, anchor yourselves to help you through. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, do feel free. We've got another 5 minutes or so.
Well, I think we've either been a model of clarity and brevity, Rick, or we've bored them into submission and silence. No. I don't really want a show of hands to work out which it is in case it's the latter.
Lots of very valuable, very well communicated information.
Yeah. Just a reminder to everybody, of course, that we'd welcome any comments and any follow-up to us. As has been said by Damien, our contact details are being displayed, so please feel free to come back to us if we can help with anything.
I think we'll allow another minute for questions. So we'll go through to 12:59. A few people logging off just now, so that's fine. We'll hang around for a moment longer. And thank you for your thanks, Graham, Michael, and everybody else. Okay, everybody, I think we'll conclude there. Thanks again for attending. And just as a final reminder, we will be sharing the slides, and you will find the webinar on the Agencia website, which is on the screen at the moment, and also through our social media. We'll be sharing on a number of platforms. So thanks very much again. Thanks to our panelists, Richard and Nick, really helpful. And as mentioned, lots of valuable and concise information. So hopefully that's going to help people in managing in their areas. So thanks very much, and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.